Mrs. Jimenez Barbat, implementation of the Europe for Citizens program. Mrs. Barbat has the floor for 4 minutes.
Estimado comisario.
Commissioner, President, colleagues. I'd like to start by thanking all of my colleagues from the Culture and Education Committee who've worked with me in a spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding on this report on the implementation of the Europe for Citizens program report. The Europe for Citizens program is the only Commission program of which the objective is to encourage direct participation from citizens in the Union and to promote dialogue between institutions, organisations of civil society organisations and local administrations. That's why the Culture Committee has asked for an increase in the budget for this programme in order to meet the objectives that have been set for it. First of all, I would like to point out that the budget for the programme for the 2014-2020 period has seen a significant reduction, 14% lower than it was for the previous period. In the Parliament and the Culture and Education Committee, we would like to see an increase in the budget, 15 million euros, in order to ensure that we can actually meet the that we can actually finance all of the projects that arrive at the evaluation agency. If we compare it with the budget for Erasmus and Creative Europe programs, it's clear that we need to make more effort financially. Secondly, we would like to ask the Commission to develop a more innovative communication strategy. This program must be better known in Europe. Unlike other programs, Europe for Citizens is not particularly well known, and there's a very low level of participation between NGOs and foundations that deal with issues relating to European citizenship amongst councils and also regional and city networks. We need to have a more effective platform and one which is easier to access and will allow a more in-depth knowledge of the funds that are available, and we also need to strengthen relations with the member state national contact points. We want all organisations and local administrations to know the possibilities that this programme makes available to them, and also countries that have not yet done so should designate a national contact point. Thirdly, the European Remembrance strand of the European for Citizens programme should not just take account of Europe's history and its memory, but also its future. We would like to see a version of history that not only looks at differences, but also tries to overcome these differences and look towards integration. We want to encourage a more optimistic vision, an integrated vision of Europe, in order to try to forge a common future. Lastly, but not leastly, the report states fearlessly that the next generation of the programme should be adopted in line with ordinary legislative procedure. The Parliament should be on an equal footing with the Council. I would like to emphasise that as the only European Union institution that is directly elected by citizens, the European Parliament should be able to play its full role as European Union co-legislator when we are talking about a programme that is specifically designed to encourage citizen participation. That's why my report urges the Commission to find a legal basis which will allow the next generation of the programme to see proper participation from the European Parliament throughout the adoption and implementation of the programme. Therefore, colleagues, I would urge you to support the report as adopted in committee. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole Jimenez.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jimenez Barbat. And I see that we have our Commissioner, Mr. King. You have the floor, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. My colleague, Commissioner Avramopoulos, sends his regrets, but has asked me to say a few words on his behalf. Honourable members, the Europe for Citizens programme offers a unique platform to reach out to citizens and to engage them in a debate about the future of Europe. In the year of its 10th anniversary as a fully fledged programme, with its own identity, the Europe for Citizens programme is well established. Stakeholders and beneficiaries appreciate it as one of the most relevant means to involve citizens in shaping their, that is, our European Union. Projects funded by the programme will now also offer placements for the European Solidarity Corps. This will allow young Europeans to put their civic engagement into practice, fully in line with the objectives of the programme. This is why I'm glad that the European Parliament has prepared this implementation report on the programme, which looks back at the first 3 years. I'd like to thank the Parliament, and in particular the rapporteur, Mrs. Jimenez Barbat, for the commitment and the effort that they have put into preparing this report. The report not only gives an overview of the programme's implementation, it will also be an important starting point for the mid-term evaluation, which we're currently preparing. It will provide some first orientations for a new citizenship programme beyond 2020. Let me stress the elements of your report which we shall have the chance to jointly reflect on in the near future. First, as you mentioned, the budget. Under the current multi-annual financial framework, this has been a major challenge for the Europe for Citizens programme. The participation in the programme has become very competitive, and success rates have decreased to very low levels in some measures, and we need to look at that. Second, the streamlined structure of the current programme, with the two strands, focusing on European remembrance and democratic engagement and civic participation, works well. It's positive, allowing for a more focused approach and increasing the programme's impact. Last, but by no means least, the issue of the legal base, which you raise, that could enable the European Parliament to get involved in the adoption of a new programme as co-legislator. In view of the mid-term evaluation, let me assure you that the Commission seeks the strongest possible cooperation with this House on both the political direction and the implementation of the Europe for Citizens programme over the 4 remaining years and, of course, looking ahead beyond 2020. In conclusion, can I just acknowledge the European Parliament's important role both in preparing and assessing the current Europe for Citizens programme. We're only at the beginning of our cooperation to give new momentum to this programme. The Commission looks forward to continuing to work with the Parliament towards our common objective to encourage the maximum participation of our citizens in building the European Union of the future. Thank you.
Grazie, signor Commissario. Adesso...
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, on behalf of the Budgets Committee, Mr. Christoforou, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I am deeply convinced that programs such as Europe for Citizens, where I have the honor of being the rapporteur for opinion of the Budgets Committee, is a program that is harmonized and serves the aims that we have set for ourselves to serve the European values and principles. And in this spirit, I believe that the President of the European Commission, Mr. Commission, spoke about the white paper for the future of Europe. If we want Europe to have a future in a period where we see that Euroscepticism and populism carry everything before them, we should help programs like this program, Europe for Citizens, because it touches the civil society. This is a real European program for citizens. It is a program that is insufficiently funded, only 185 million. If we really want to help promote and foster and nurture European ideals, we should help these programs more. Like the program Creative Europe, this program Europe for Citizens, like Erasmus+, all these programs should be coordinated and designed in a manner to really serve our citizens and our society for a Europe of the future.
Thank you very much. Now, for the Constitutional Affairs Committee, Mr. Ujazdowski, 1 minute 30.
Panie Przewodniczący, koleżanki i koledzy.
Thank you very much, President. The Constitutional Committee welcomes the shape and implementation of this program. We believe, or we have some remarks which I will sum up in 3 areas. First, we have to valorize and support those programs which focus on European remembrance. Secondly, we have to promote openness to citizens of this very program. By this I mean a greater participation of the local authorities in member states. I'm talking about supporting national contact points so that this program is better known. Language barriers should also be reduced when submitting requests. And third is that we should open this program to countries outside of the EU, like European Free Trade Area countries or candidate countries. I think this program should be open and aimed at building real relationships with neighboring countries. And we support the request or motion which assumes a greater role of the European Parliament, a clear legal basis, and our participation in shaping of the priorities. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear from the views of the different political groups. From the EPP group, Mr. Fisas. Santiago, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. I'd like to thank the rapporteur, Mrs. Jimenez Barbat, for the excellent work she's done and for the report she has done. Yesterday we were talking about nationalism, populism, Euroscepticism, and we can't give up in front of this. We have to fight these, and the way to do that is to involve our citizens. In order to do this, we have to ensure that citizens better understand the EU, its history and its diversity. The Europe for Citizens programme report shows that in the medium to long term these programmes can fight these phenomena. The programmes are still very young and not very well known, but the number of applicants show that citizens are interested in being involved in the European project. We can see the projects that are put forward are very high quality. However, many of them go away empty-handed because there isn't enough money. In the last financial framework, as the rapporteur said, the budget for this was cut by 14%. It's not because the projects aren't good, but because there isn't enough money for so many projects. We have to be more ambitious when we're talking about making a contribution to a better understanding of the EU and its history amongst our citizens. I would call upon the Commission to increase the budget to at least the budget in order to ensure better use of the funds. This will help to bring citizens closer to the European project. Thank you.
Santiago, per il gruppo dei...
Thank you, Santiago. For the S&D group, Mrs. Guillaume. Sylvie, 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Thank you, President, ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague Teresa Jimenez Barbat for her work in a field like this. Cooperation between political groups is vital to achieve an ambitious report and lend fresh lustre to the Europe for Citizens programme. This is a fundamental process. Europe is facing Euroscepticism, and there's a lack of tolerance, and the idea of belonging to a common space is being lost. Now, on the points colleagues have mentioned, firstly, you've got the budget. I think we need to send out a very clear message. We want a substantial increase in the resources made available to this programme, which very directly concerns European citizens. This programme is based on too small a sum. You shouldn't have such a low success rate for applications. This leads to a lack of credibility in the programme in the minds of the most committed who are most interested in it, most committed to it. It's got a budget of €1 per citizen, 500 million. Also, citizens need to be involved in the legislative process. I think that's non-negotiable. There also needs to be more active involvement with networks and the digital domain. The programme should be more visible on the web. It should not be bureaucratic but pedagogic in its approach. We need to reach out to citizens, particularly the youngest ones, looking at the low voter turnout at the last European elections in particular. We should move away from more traditional meeting formats and work in a more dynamic way, sharing experience. Also, the procedures for the programme need to be simplified. We need to bear in mind small project applicants more and define the priorities to include civic society, which is in the best place to express citizens' concerned. We need to reach out to a wider, more diverse audience, including disadvantaged people in particular who need particular support. We need to promote town twinning and other measures which are recognised for their success and which people are very familiar with. In the hostile climate faced by Europe, this programme should be the jumping off point for reaching out to citizens committed to a stronger Europe and a stronger sense of solidarity. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Guillaume. Thank you very much, Mrs. Guillaume. For 1.5 minutes, we'll now hear from Mrs. Tomasic.
Thank you very much. The European Union really is in a crisis which we will not be able to overcome if the Union is not set into a realistic framework in which it will deal only with issues for which it has appropriate capacities, with appropriate respect for the subsidiarity principle. But programs such as this one are doing precisely the opposite. They are raising the EU to the pedestal of an almighty entity whose role is to re-educate citizens, ingrain them with new identities and meddle into all walks of life. The report recommends that the European Remembrance trend should develop a European identity which is plural, transcultural and open to migration flows and influences from the rest of the world. I, however, do not see a need for creation of artificial identities, but I also have to admit that this is also not clear to me what would be the nature of this identity based only on political ambitions of European elites and the needs of a political moment. The citizens who primarily feel European feel so because there is so much in Europe that connects us despite our heterogeneousness, and these are primarily Judeo-Christian values. There is no mention of those values here, although without them Europe would not be what it is today. It is interesting that this recommendation is placed among the objectives of the European Remembrance trend. If I remember correctly, communist Yugoslavia was also involved in creating artificial identities and promoting values not rooted in tradition. It didn't end well, and it was in the end brought down precisely by generations who were systematically brainwashed by it, and there is a lesson to be learned from this.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tomasic. For 2 minutes, Mrs. Bilbao Barandica.
Thank you, President. I'd like to congratulate the rapporteur for this report because I also believe that we have to increase the budget for the Europe for Citizens programme. I would also like to say that some of its most important sectors, such as European Remembrance, only 6% of requests can be financed, not because the proposals are short on quality, but because we're short on money. I would also like to emphasise that the contact points help the beneficiaries understand the programme. And I would say this because at the moment we're seeing nationalist discourse which led to so many catastrophes in our history, and now they're being posed again to solutions to our biggest problems. We need to have more imagination, more interest and resources to tell people exactly where this leads. We need to hold up a mirror to history and say that some of these speeches that we're hearing today are the same that were used to justify tragedies in the past. We have to emphasise that the EU can be useful and helpful, but we have to oppose selfishness, a lack of solidarity, war, violence and poverty. That's why I want to see more funding. Some initiatives undertaken by certain members and can be compared to Nazism or Stalinism. The main objective of this program is to recover our historic memory. That's why I'm happy that there's an initiative to remember the 80th anniversary of the Spanish Civil War that has been financed. This is necessary for truth, justice and healing. 80 years after the Guernica bombing, one of the member states who was involved in that massacre and a member of the EU has still not recognised their responsibility or apologised for what they did. Today, the same member state will not cooperate with universal justice in order to investigate and condemn the criminals from its dictatorship, and it will be very difficult with this behaviour for this member state to actually enter the EU today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bilbao. For 1.5 minutes, Mr. Maltese.
Grazie, Presidente.
Yes, thank you very much, President. Well, our group has voted against Europe for Citizens, but I will be voting in favour of this report. And I do that for pragmatic reasons. This programme works, it involves citizens and associations, and they deserve to have their voice heard. It's important because participation is the key for saving the European Union. This programme encourages the participation of Europe's citizens. If I look at the list of the projects that have been financed, if I look at my own country, for example, I think this is all very positive. Associations against the mafia, associations protecting the rights of the Roma, and they're one of the major excluded people in Europe. And these are people who still face terrible discrimination every day. I do agree with the rapporteur, however, that the funding is clearly insufficient, and there's another important question, which is the legal base. I think it's a paradox that a programme that's supposed to get citizens involved is a project which limits the role of the European Parliament. It's key that Europe's citizens and their elected representatives should be involved. So I think it's important that the legal base should be changed so that we can better formulate the objectives. I find this rather weak, vague and subject to ideological abuse. For example, combating Euroscepticism and criticisms of Europe. I mean, I think that this is ridiculous. I think that real pro-Europeans have to be very critical of Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Maltese. Mrs. Trüppel is next.
Herr Präsident, Herr Kommissar.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, Europe for Citizens. The title says it all. It's a programme that directly reaches out to citizens and gives them opportunities, additional opportunities to put into practice good ideas, to develop projects together and to cooperate across borders. There are two main priorities for the programme. Remembrance. Against all the controversy, we know that that's particularly important in the EU, given the history of Stalinism, National Socialism and fascism to be processed, to move to contribute to a genuinely democratic society where differences and minorities are handled positively rather than marginalising those people. The second point is civic participation. This is an area which really has to do with the quality of democratic life in the EU. Citizens have an opportunity through town twinning partnerships or through the ideas that they have that have been named in some cases to receive support so that common projects can be put into practice. The problem, however, is that this budget is so small that it doesn't live up to the expectations it sets out. It's still worse that it's being cut in the latest MFF. So that is making no sense, where the Parliament and the Commission are both saying we need to do more with this programme. We can see from the number of applicants there's a great need out there, and citizens want to be part of the programme because it gives them additional scope. The task then is to work more focusedly on ensuring the budget for the programme is raised, meaning that we provide for the demand for more opportunities to work together with grassroots European citizens putting projects into practice. The next MFF needs to ensure an appreciable change. Citizens can be part of the whole thing, meaning that we increase democratic participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Trüppel. For 1.5 minutes, Mrs. D'Amato.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Europe for Citizens is a very symbolic programme because it creates a united sense of European solidarity. However, we have to look at the reasons why the EU is losing credibility today. We've seen over years that in the programme and in the amendments here, we're trying to fight Euroscepticism. However, Euroscepticism is a fact in the reality we're experiencing today. You can see that just with Brexit. Here, the very idea of a European project is being called into question. It's unlikely that Euroscepticism can be debated in these terms, however. To help you understand, I can give you an example from Italy. Italians have always been amongst the most enthusiastic about Italy, but even in Italy, in recent years, people have moved away from Europe, and there's increasing disenchantment. And this has come around for many reasons, economic, political reasons, and because there's a lack of democratic participation. What's at stake here is the institution's ability to respond to legitimate questions being asked by citizens of their institutions. This is why we've asked the Commission and Member States to strengthen links between the priorities of these programmes and between all policies, particularly those dealing with social policy and jobs. Today, if we don't have direct participation in Europe, it will lose all credibility.
Thank you very much, Mrs. D'Amato. Mr. Rebecca will be next.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the Europe for Citizens programme is the only European programme directly addressed through its 4 budget lines to all Europe's citizens. I would observe the area of culture, the area that should develop unity in diversity, as in the motto of the EU, is the one that suffers the most in terms of financing and therefore the importance we attach to it. The report on the implementation of this programme is accurate and to the point. Perhaps the only thing to say is that it's not critical enough. The problems it raises are acute. Regionalisation of projects, isolation of countries on the outer edges, poor lump sums in many cases, annual priorities that don't suit some countries, low pre-financing and a lack of pre-financing for town twinning. In Romania, between 2014 and 15, the number of applications rose significantly, adding to the approximately 3,000 projects submitted by each deadline. Unfortunately, there's not enough money. Less than 10% are successful, and that leads to still greater scepticism regarding the project. And this funding is also capped at 1,000 per project in 2 budget lines and still lower in the others. Now, according to my information, the national contact points want more involvement in the post-project application because that's when they're asked for information more. And also, they've built up relationships with applicants they don't want to disappoint. NCPs would like to know more about the selection procedure, how evaluators do their work, how applications are scored, and generally they want more transparency and cooperation. Romania's NCP would like a relationship with the Commission and the executive agency based on partnership. Today's relationship borders on the humiliating. NCPs are the link between the institutions and the applicants. The EU is expending very much resources, not just money, but also time and human resources on areas that benefit globalisation, uniformity and multinationals. Culture, education and above all projects for citizens are a kind of Cinderella by contrast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rebecca. For 1 minute, we'll have Mr. Ciudadanos.
It is really troubling how in such a report we keep seeing 2 mentions, Euroscepticism and immigration. we have to comment some things. First of all, it is hybris and anti-democratic to write that in the EU the anti-European powers came ahead. Brexit was a slap in the face of the EU as it has become to date. What we see is that you are trying to promote uniform thought, and no one should have any dissenting opinion, and you are accusing any nationalist movement as isolationist. You are also trying to force the inclusion of immigrants when obviously most of them do not accept the European culture, and first of all they are not yet European citizens. You should change your ways and fast, because those things are turning the citizens away from the EU.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Synadinos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Synadinos. For 1.5 minutes, Mrs. Verheyen. President, colleagues, the programme Europe for Citizens is at this moment in time more important than ever, calling for more democracy and involvement on the one hand, but with anti-European, anti-democratic movements on the other. So this is an important programme for cohesion of the EU. It's important to raise awareness, to raise citizenship and participation, and it builds friendships and contacts across Europe. We need more in Europe now that brings people together, rather than as just a question of building walls and dividing people. So it's important that this programme has received a lot of resonance in society, although it's always been underfinanced. The number of good quality projects entered has always been much higher than the number of acceptances. And this situation is getting worse under the current MFF. Very good programs that fit the criteria have to be rejected every year. And of course the applicants get very frustrated by this. They make a big effort to put good projects together, and at the end of the day they can't count upon support at the end. So it's important that this project should continue to build understanding of Europe, and it should be given proper funding. The Parliament and the Culture Committee in particular has called for the amount to be increased to about 500 million. That's basically €1 per European citizen. And I think that would increase the effectiveness of this programme. Unlike other projects at European level, here we don't have a lack of good projects being handed in. Thank you very much, Mrs. Verheyen. For 2 minutes, it would be Mrs. Libacka.
Thank you very much, President. Yesterday, President Juncker presented the white paper on the future of Europe. But there will not be a new beginning of the 27 member states without the commitment of the Europeans. We will not have a strong European Union without the faith of its citizens in the efficiency of this project. That is why our goal should be a union that is active, that promotes inclusiveness, that moves the citizens closer to its institutions. But it should also be a union that can counter the populism and Euroscepticism that is on the rise right now. And this program gives us hope in that respect, because this program promotes the idea of European citizenship. This program promotes civic partnership, the way for the citizens to get involved. But in order to be able to come on top of all those challenges, this program has to be more efficient and also more innovative. The report is an excellent one, and I would like to focus on 3 recommendations. First, what we need is a much more visible communication strategy and promotion strategy. That means that the national contact points must be more active. These cannot be just officials, so to say. These must be people who know how to create, who know how to target those parts of our society who are still hesitating, who are having doubts. Secondly, the Europe for Citizens program in its priorities must take into account the needs of our citizens, must take into account the challenges of our reality. And last but not least, this is obvious, but we cannot stress it enough, financing.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wybatska. For 1.5 minutes, Mr. Merias.
Chair, according to the rhetoric of the Treaty for the European Union is based on two basic principles. Representative democracy, which means that the member states are represented during the Council and the peoples are represented through the Parliament. And second, participative democracy. This means that the decisions are taken by the citizens themselves. And this can be done through referenda and through the European legislative initiative. But the experience until now has shown that the European Union is afraid of referenda because the peoples condemn the neoliberal policies of the Union. They condemn the European Union of bureaucracy and bankocracy. And the European Union has shown that they don't want to foster the European legislative initiative. That's what we saw through the Save the Water initiative. So this means that the citizens are more and more alienated because the European Union is based on austerity and on brutal fiscal consolidation. This means that there are more and more poor in our European Union. So these artificial initiatives cannot face the crisis of legitimation of the Union. These programs are paternalistic. They are imposed from on high, from the elites. And this is clear from the title of the program, Europe for Citizens, and not Europe of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank
you very much, Mr. Marias. For 2 minutes, Mr. Jakovčić.
We are now marking the 10th anniversary of Europe for Citizens, of a program which has initially started in the 90s and earlier, when the Council of Europe had some similar programs. I had the opportunity to participate in such programs entitled, for example, Ambassadors of Local Democracy. Today this is the ALDE, which is part of this program, Europe for Citizens. So these early beginnings that I participated in were excellent, really contributed to the development of democracy, and the presence of the Council of Europe in Croatia, at that time in Istria, in very small municipalities which are bilingual, was very important. So that development of such projects in candidate countries is an excellent idea. Also, I would like to say something about twinning of cities, which is an excellent idea. Also, twinning of regions should be included, because this would be a good basis for exchange of experiences and building a common European spirit. Another thing I would like to particularly underline is the thesis, main thesis of this report. I do wholeheartedly support this report, but we should turn the thesis around. Not say we are fighting against populism and Euroscepticism, but that we are fighting for truth in Europe, truth about our history, which sometimes is twisted, even in this house. So truth also about what is ahead of us. Because if we want to dismantle Europe, as some are trying to do, it is so easy to do. But someone in 30 or 50 years will be trying to put it back together again. So I think it is the key time now to speak about truth about Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Jakovčić. We have a slight problem here, which could affect our timing. So I'll have to keep a close eye on it. Our timing seems to be around.
Thank you, Chair.
Απογοήτευση και αδιαφορία των Ευρωπαίων πολιτών απέναντι στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση και τις δομές της και αγανάκτηση απέναντι στις νεοφιλελεύθερες πολιτικές. Η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση...
Thank you. There's a problem with the neoliberal policies. Instead of fundamentally changing its policies for the citizens, and instead of understanding that citizens is creating a several-speed Europe of the rich and the poor without solidarity, it's pursuing the same policy furrow, and its programs which are intended to change that reality and change history are still going in the same direction. Programs that come from the top down, and which, if you like, lend an identity, a European identity, without the citizens being involved. So, colleagues, that kind of instrument cannot mean that young Europeans have to go on fighting for austerity for a better Europe. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Chountis. Spricht nun.
Thank you, Mr. Chountis. 2 minutes for Mr. O'Flynn.
Thank you. Let me start with some common ground. Clearly, if your project for European integration is to recover, mercifully without the United Kingdom, it will require an enhanced level of social solidarity between the peoples of Europe. So it's not surprising that integrationists should set such store by top-down projects designed to tell citizens of Europe's nation states that their prime collective identity should be a continental one rather than a national one. When, for example, German citizens are next told that Greek citizens need another euro bailout, federalists will wish their first reaction to be, yes, we Europeans must stand together, and not, why should more German money go to Greece? But I'm afraid you might as well push water uphill as to try and indoctrinate people about the collective loyalties that they feel. In no other continent on earth are so many distinct cultures and countries and languages held in such close proximity. That's what makes Europe the most interesting continent. People like Mr. Verhofstadt think Europe is a continent of dwarves that cannot compete in the modern world, and then that think we need to bring every aspect of public policy under the EU umbrella. But there's a better way forward, and that is to be less doctrinaire and less rigid, to get behind NATO as our key defensive alliance, to allow nation states to return to national currencies that reflect their economic conditions, to trust that the peoples of a democratic Europe will be too sensible to return to the days of ultranationalism that caused the shedding of so much blood. But to try and force a European identity through top-down programmes such as Europe for Citizens is self-defeating. You are wasting your time, and you are also wasting our money.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege O'Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. O'Flynn. Mrs. Bild for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist, said that at the basis of all doctrinaire belief is a belief that governments are wiser than their people. This text is actually totalitarian propaganda, and it is an attack on liberty and democracy. Any criticism against your federalist European project you think must be eradicated. You even want to use taxpayer money to fight against stigmatization of immigrants and to prevent any counter-discourse. However, I think that European people can see a clear message here, whether you look at the Hungarian referendum or the different inquiries that have been carried out. In France, 56% of those people asked in 2015 are against allowing migrants in. Your devotion to your false devotion to liberty has been unmasked, and now European people are seeing this and are rising up.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Bilde.
Thank you, Mrs. Bild. For 2 minutes, Mrs. Mitzi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Europe is undergoing challenging times. The current political season, with elections to be held in various EU countries, the growing Eurosceptic sentiments are creating deep divisions and social polarisation, threatening the very foundations and the very existence of the European project. The European Union needs to reconnect with its citizens, putting them back in the heart of its agenda. Encouraging civic participation and enhancing people's understanding of the history and diversity of the Union have never been as important for the future of Europe as it is today. This is the litmus test that Europe cannot fail. That is why I support this report and this very symbolic and first of its kind programme, Europe for Citizens, which aims to bring the European Union closer to its citizens. The programme has reached more than 7 million citizens in thousands of towns and cities around Europe, helping them to understand better the European Union, promoting the Union ideals and values, and improving the conditions for direct civic and democratic participation and active dialogue between the EU and its citizens. The programme provides a unique opportunity to strengthen a sense of European citizenship and belonging and enhances solidarity and mutual understanding. Active citizenship, education and intercultural dialogue are paramount to the building of an open and inclusive society. This programme is one of the key instruments to achieve this. Despite its success, we need to constantly reinforce the programme and increase the programme's budgets, projects and goals. Member States need to also get actively involved and support the programme and to further raise the programme's profile by making people more aware of it. It is important that the programme focuses not only on the past but also on the future and on current challenges such as migration, radicalisation and social inclusion, among others. I hope that the Commission and the Member States will implement the recommendations of this report, which will help to reinforce the programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitzi. And now, for 1 minute, Mrs. Niereda.
Thank you, Chair. What does the term European citizen mean? It's quite broad. You could take whatever meaning you want out of it. It's very important that we have something like this, living in these uncertain times. But as public representatives, we have to accept realistic responsibility and recognise the challenges facing the European Union. We have to ask the question, what is responsible for this change? We need a new direction, a direction with decisive, courageous leadership to give equality to our people. The right wing is on the increase, and I believe that the answer is not more federalism. The answer is not more Europe or less Europe, but social Europe. A Europe that is not going in the direction of militarism, but in the direction of peace, employment and public investment. A Europe which protects its people from poverty and which welcomes those who are not safe in their own home countries. A Europe where human rights are a primary objective. That, it seems to me, should be the definition of European citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Niereda. For 1 minute, Mr. Morgano. Thank you, President. Thank you to the rapporteur for the excellent report, which demonstrates encouraging results from the Europe for Citizens programme. There's a geographic rebalancing of projects and it encourages the participation of citizens. Despite the positive opening to my statement, I would like to point out the ongoing discrepancy between the concerns that the European Union and Member States say they have faced with rising populism and rampant anti-Europeanism on the one hand, and the reality of actual choices on the other hand when it comes to financing. This programme, which is precious enough to be described as unique in promoting the civic commitment of Europeans, continues to suffer from a lack of financing, and I fully agree with the recommendations which have been set out, in particular better legal basis for the programme and better financing. On the political level, the financial allocation shows how much value is attached to the programme itself. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgano. Mrs. Smolkova.
Program Europa pre občanov je výnimočný, pretože
Thank you very much. The Europe for Citizens programme really is something extraordinary. It gives our citizens a space in which they can get involved and explore the past and present of the EU and its member states. I personally have seen how a small town in the east of Slovakia was able to get funding from this programme and invited 270 guests from across Europe to an event. To get this kind of internationalism in a small town, I think it's really something special. It gave the citizens an opportunity to get to know other people from elsewhere and to make friends. a conference called "The Influence of EU Expansion on Life in the Rural World" took place, and there were lots of new discoveries and lots of new knowledge for everyone who was involved, including myself. I hope the Europe for Citizens programme will continue to get the green light, and I hope that there will be enough funding for it in future.
Thank
you, Mrs. Smolkova. We now move on to the Catch the Eye procedure. I've got twice as many requests as we can accommodate, and please therefore understand that I can't give all colleagues the floor. Mrs. Šojdrová first.
Thank you, Chair. It is typical that the Europe for Citizens programme gets criticised by the Front National and other extremist parties. Populists and extremists need people to forget their own history so that history can repeat itself. This programme, Europe for Citizens, should be helping civic society, helping municipalities to encourage mutual exchanges, to get to know each other, to reflect on history and the future of a common Europe. The only disadvantage of this programme is its underfinancing. 185 million for 6 years, it's really symbolic for a programme of this importance. I must evaluate it very positively how this programme has been working, the contact points and its functioning in general. Europe is based on citizens' support. It does not have any perspective without the citizens' understanding and their support. If we do want to not repeat the destructive history, we need to support civic society.
Thank you, Mrs. Šojdrová. Mrs. Ward.
Thank you very much, President. Europe is the sum total of its citizens. And that includes the millions of British citizens living, working and travelling within and beyond the European Union, particularly young people, broadening their minds, encountering the other, learning life skills. In fact, learning how to be good, responsible citizens in the 21st century, both at home and abroad. The young people who could vote in last year's British referendum overwhelmingly voted to remain in the EU. However, Theresa May's continued direction towards a hard and damaging Brexit threatens to rob future generations of many wonderful, life-enhancing, character-building and community-minded opportunities that benefit not just themselves, but the places in which they live.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. Mr. Flanagan.
Thank you very much. I see that democratic engagement and civic participation are something that's encouraged under this programme. Wonderful, brilliant idea, but the problem is this institution doesn't really believe in it, because if this institution gave a damn about democratic engagement, when the Irish people voted against the Lisbon Treaty because they didn't want to give up any more sovereignty, you would have respected it. When the people of Ireland voted against Nice, ye didn't accept it. You sent the bully boys over, you sent the commissioners over with Michael O'Leary on Ryanair planes to convince us we were wrong. Where is the connection there between democratic engagement? We engaged, ye rejected. When it comes to Greece, ye rejected Oxy. If you want to do something about scepticism, kill the causes of scepticism, appreciate democracy, shut up talking about it, and do it!
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Mr. Venter.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, President. The purpose and objective of this programme is to contribute to European people's understanding of our history, to build a better civic society. This is extremely important, especially now, with Euroscepticism on the rise. This program should see its procedures simplified, and requests should be possible to lodge using electronic means of communications. But this program now allows creative exchange of experience to build relationships, to support European values, and to keep a living memory of our history. Year by year, we see more programs, very good programs throughout Europe, but unfortunately, not nearly enough of them get money they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Venter. Mrs. Grappini. Thank you, President. Europe for Citizens is a programme with an excellent title, but it needs to be explained, managed and financed above all to have a hard and fast effect. I will congratulate the rapporteur. Obviously, I support the report in a context when there's a lot of Euroscepticism abroad. I think Europe for the Citizens should be a priority for us all. We need to improve the programme. We need financing that also takes into account geographic criteria. There are two components, Remembrance and Civic Participation, on a multinational basis. These are important going up to 2020. The European Parliament needs to encourage citizens and their institutions all the way. We are direct representatives of the citizens. I think all democratic institutions, European or national, should realise that Europe for Citizens recognises that citizens are the most important people, and it benefits citizens, this programme. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin Grappini. Zum Abschluss des Catch-the-Eye-Verfahrens, Herr Kollege Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, to conclude the Catch-the-Eye procedure.
Firstly, I welcome Commissioner King's wearing a green tie. It may be indicative of his desire to become an Irish citizen, like some of his British colleagues have done here in the Parliament. If so, you're most welcome. Appropriate for the debate, Europe for citizens, but the question is, are the citizens for Europe? Not so, or not enough of them. And people have indicated reasons. Populism, scepticism, nationalism, self-serving opportunism a la Marine Le Pen, and so forth. But the rapporteur mentioned one or two other reasons today very important. One, the programme we're talking about is not well enough known. So if people aren't aware of something, they can't appreciate it. That's the first challenge. Secondly is the low success rate in applications. So instead of people being delighted to apply and be successful, they get deflated. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. I agree completely we need a bigger budget, but we should also expand the programme into the voluntary sector, sporting sector, where there is a true dimension of European value.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. On behalf of the Commission now, Commissioner King.
This debate this morning. Thank you again for the report. Thank you for the various comments, which I shall make sure are reported in full to and shared with my colleague, Commissioner Avramopoulos. Thank you, if I may, to Mr. Kelly. I have a very warm memory of the 5 years I spent in one way or another on the island of Ireland. We've got this report looking at the 3 years of the programme. We need now to learn the lessons from that experience for the next generation of citizenship programmes. And let me take this opportunity to stress again the importance of this work, to reconnect with our citizens and engage with civil society, in particular, as a number of people have said, with young people, to build an understanding of our history, to celebrate our diversity, to counter intolerance, not least at a time when, here and there, we see the rise of polarisation. Today's debate is an important contribution to what is going to be our joint reflection on how best to take this work forward. Let's use the Europe for Citizens programme to establish a public forum for this important debate about our shared future. Let us work together to reinforce the programme as an instrument which can reach out and engage citizens across Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner King. To wind up the debate, we will now have the rapporteur once again for 2 minutes, Mrs. Jimenez Barbat.
Thank you, colleagues, for all of your kind words. Thank you to Commissioner King for your position on the proposed legislation that we're asking for. I know that when we talk to European citizens in these difficult times, it's a genuine challenge. However, we've heard so much Euroscepticism that speaking to citizens is necessary. The European citizens are at the root of the idea of a real European Union, and that's where the hope for its future lies. Today, this project is moving forward only with difficulty, because we have to ensure that the European Union is seen as more than just an economic club. It's a very difficult historic political time that we're experiencing now, and I think that Europe for Citizens has crucial importance, because we want to have programmes that will allow us to look at our shared past and allow us to overcome problems in the past which have separated us. This project is the political expression of the fact that we're not going to give up to a future of Euroscepticism and selfishness and disunity between European unions. This programme requires a strong integration for European solidarity, and I would like to thank all colleagues for your support.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jimenez Barbat. The debate is thereby concluded and the vote will take place today.